Ladies and gentlemen, pay close attention because what you are about to hear may explain the silence that has been weighing on your heart. It may explain the distance that feels louder than any spoken words. It may explain why someone's actions continue to stay in your mind long after their words have faded away. There are moments in life when people reveal the truth without ever speaking it directly. There are moments when actions become more honest than conversations. There are moments when the heart communicates in ways that the mind struggles to understand. Sometimes, a person is trying desperately to tell you something, yet they cannot find the courage to say it openly. They do not come forward with a clear confession. They do not offer a perfect explanation. Instead, the truth appears through hesitation, confusion, distance, warmth, silence, longing, contradiction, and repeated returns. This is where the deeper story begins. This is where the hidden truth lives. A person does not always reveal themselves through direct words. Sometimes they reveal themselves through the things they avoid. Sometimes they reveal themselves through the patterns they repeat. Sometimes they reveal themselves through what they cannot let go of. If you have been waiting for a sign, wondering whether they still think about you, asking yourself why they pull away only to return again, why they seem distant one moment and emotional the next, why they disappear and then suddenly reappear in your life, then listen carefully. The answer may already be standing in front of you. It may not be hidden inside a message. It may not be found in an apology. It may be hidden inside the contradiction itself. The person on your mind is not as calm as they appear. They are not as detached as they pretend to be. They are not as unaffected as they want everyone to believe. Something inside them remains active. Something inside them remains restless. Something inside them remains unfinished. A feeling has been awakened. A memory has been stirred. A truth has begun to rise to the surface. And when people cannot face the truth directly, the truth finds another way to express itself. It appears through hesitation. It appears through repeated thoughts. It appears through dreams. It appears through curiosity. It appears through the urge to check on someone, even after deciding not to. It appears through the need to keep distance while never fully walking away. One of the deepest realities of human psychology is that the conscious mind can hide many things, but the deeper mind is often far more honest. Someone may claim they do not care, yet their behavior tells a different story. Someone may insist they have moved on, yet they find themselves thinking about the same person again and again. Someone may say they feel nothing, yet their emotions continue revealing themselves in small and unexpected ways. The truth does not disappear simply because it is denied. Very often, the truth becomes stronger when it is resisted. Think about that for a moment. Why would someone fight so hard against a feeling that means nothing? Why would someone work so hard to prove their indifference if they were truly indifferent? Why would someone constantly explain their absence if they genuinely did not care? The answer is simple. People often protect themselves most fiercely from the emotions that affect them the most. When someone touches a deeply emotional place within them, fear begins to appear. When someone awakens an old wound, fear appears. When someone reminds them of what they desire, fear appears. When someone becomes important enough to change them, fear appears. And many people respond to fear in predictable ways. They retreat. They become quiet. They build walls. They create confusion. They test the connection. They avoid vulnerability. They convince themselves that distance will give them control over emotions they do not fully understand. But distance does not erase feelings. Silence does not erase feelings. Avoidance does not erase feelings. These things only hide emotions temporarily. That is why the message your person may be trying to communicate is much simpler than it appears. You matter more than I am ready to admit. For many people, that is an incredibly difficult truth. It is difficult for the proud heart. It is difficult for the wounded heart. It is difficult for the fearful heart. Part of them wants closeness. Part of them wants protection. Part of them remembers the comfort they felt around you. Part of them remembers the risk of being vulnerable. Part of them wants to reach out. Part of them wants to run. When these opposite forces collide, confusion begins. The person becomes divided within themselves. One voice tells them to speak. Another voice tells them to remain silent. One voice tells them to trust. Another voice tells them to protect themselves. One voice tells them to move forward. Another voice tells them to hide. Living inside that kind of inner conflict is exhausting. And when someone is experiencing that battle, their behavior often becomes confusing to everyone around them. But confusion does not always mean a lack of feeling. Sometimes confusion means emotional overload. Sometimes the person who confuses you the most is the person who feels the most and understands their feelings the least. People who struggle to understand their emotions often communicate through inconsistency. They come close and then pull away. They show interest and then disappear. They start conversations and then become distant. They ask questions but avoid deeper answers. They reveal a little and then retreat before becoming vulnerable. This behavior is not always caused by cruelty. Sometimes it is fear wearing a disguise. Sometimes it is pain pretending to be strength. Sometimes it is a heart that has not yet learned how to stand openly without feeling exposed. What people refuse to confront within themselves does not simply vanish. It waits. It grows. It influences their choices. It shapes their reactions. It repeats the same emotional lessons until they finally pay attention. That is why some people continue returning to the same emotional story. They continue thinking about the same person. They continue revisiting the same memories. They continue feeling pulled toward the same connection. They are not only returning to a person, they are returning to something unresolved inside themselves. They are returning to a truth that still wants to be acknowledged. The hidden message may sound something like this: I feel something that I do not know how to carry. That is often the real confession. Not that they feel nothing, not that they have forgotten, not that they no longer care. The real struggle is that they feel more than they know how to handle. And that reality unsettles them. This is why powerful emotions often wear disguises. Distance may actually be self-protection. Pride may actually be fear. Indifference may actually be attachment. Silence may actually be inner conflict. What looks cold on the outside may be hiding a storm on the inside. Anyone who has loved a complicated person understands this truth. Some people are not difficult because they do not care. They are difficult because they care in ways that frighten them. They care in ways that expose them. They care in ways that force them to face parts of themselves they would rather avoid. When a meaningful connection acts like a mirror, not everyone is ready to look into that mirror for very long. Many people believe they are reacting to another person. In reality, they are reacting to what that person awakens within them. You may have awakened a longing they buried years ago. You may have reminded them of intimacy they never fully healed from. You may have reflected their fears back to them. You may have revealed their hidden needs. You may have touched the part of them where desire, vulnerability, hope, fear, and tenderness all exist together. And when that reflection becomes too powerful, wounded people often step back. They distance themselves from the mirror. But stepping back does not remove the reflection. It only proves how deeply it affected them. So when someone pulls away, do not immediately assume they have forgotten you. When someone becomes silent, do not immediately assume they feel nothing. When someone appears distant, do not automatically believe the connection has disappeared. Sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes the stronger the emotional connection becomes, the more frightened an emotionally unprepared person feels. Some people leave because they do not care, but many people leave because they care more than they expected. Some people leave because the story is over. Others leave because the story inside them remains unfinished. And unfinished people often create unfinished connections. They send mixed signals because they are mixed within themselves. They offer closeness and distance at the same time. They make you feel important and then unreachable. They make you feel seen and then forgotten. They make you question your value when the real struggle is their inability to manage their own emotions. That is one of the most painful truths. They may not fully understand how deeply they affected you, but they know something inside them has changed as well. Their behavior keeps revealing it. Their patterns keep revealing it. Their repeated returns keep revealing it. The message remains the same. They want closeness, but closeness scares them. They want certainty, but certainty requires honesty. They want connection, but connection requires vulnerability. They want understanding, but understanding requires self-awareness. And so they remain trapped between desire and defense, between feeling and fear, between what they want and what they believe they can handle. In that space, you become impossible to forget. You become the question they cannot fully answer. You become the memory they cannot completely erase. You become the feeling they cannot entirely control. That is why your absence may affect them more than your presence ever did. Distance removes distractions. Distance creates reflection. Distance forces emotions to rise. Without constant routines to distract them, thoughts begin returning. Memories begin returning. Regrets begin returning. Possibilities begin returning. The heart starts asking questions that the mind has avoided. A conversation returns to memory. A smile returns to memory. A feeling returns to memory. A missed opportunity returns to memory. And suddenly the person who seemed completely certain begins realizing they were never as unaffected as they pretended to be. The deeper mind works quietly. It does not announce itself loudly. It returns through recurring thoughts. It returns through dreams. It returns through memories. It returns through longing. It returns through unexpected moments when a familiar name suddenly enters the mind. The deeper self is always searching for one thing: resolution. Because what remains unresolved continues asking for attention. And in many situations, the unresolved issue is not the absence of love. It is the fear of what love requires. Love asks for honesty. Love asks for growth. Love asks for accountability. Love asks for courage. Love asks people to remove their masks. For some individuals, that feels more frightening than losing the relationship itself. And so they remain caught in a cycle. They return, they withdraw, they reach out, they pull away, they move closer, they create distance, all while trying to communicate a truth they do not yet know how to express clearly. The truth is simple. I am not fully in control of what I feel, and that scares me. Many people misunderstand love because they believe it is always clear, direct, and confident. But sometimes love appears as hesitation. Sometimes love appears as avoidance. Sometimes love appears as confusion. Sometimes love appears as repeated returns. Sometimes love exists inside a person who is still learning how to carry it. And when someone continues finding their way back through memory, curiosity, emotion, or quiet reflection, it may be because the connection still holds meaning within them. Do not confuse silence with emptiness. Do not confuse distance with disappearance. Do not confuse fear with indifference. And do not assume that a person who struggles to express their emotions feels nothing at all. Sometimes the deepest feelings are hidden behind the strongest defenses. Sometimes the loudest message is spoken without words. And sometimes the truth a person is desperately trying to tell you has been visible all along through the pattern they continue repeating. Do not mistake pride for peace. A person can look calm on the outside while carrying a storm within. Someone can appear distant while feeling more than they want to admit. A person can seem cold and unaffected while struggling with emotions that challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves. Perhaps your person is not trying to tell you that they do not care. Perhaps they are trying to tell you that caring has become the problem. Maybe these feelings have awakened something inside them that they never expected to face. Maybe you touched a part of them that had been hidden away for years. A place they kept locked and protected from the world. A place they believed nobody would ever reach. Your presence may have made it impossible for them to continue pretending that they were untouched, unaffected, or emotionally unavailable. Some people build their entire identity around control. They tell themselves that if they remain guarded, they will remain safe. If they stay detached, they will remain strong. If they keep their distance, they will avoid pain. But life has a way of challenging those beliefs. A certain person enters their life. A certain moment changes everything. A certain connection forms. Suddenly the walls begin to crack. They start feeling too much. They start remembering things they thought they had left behind. They begin wanting things they never allowed themselves to want. They begin fearing things they thought they had already overcome. Once those defenses are threatened, their entire inner world starts to shake. That may be why your person appears inconsistent. It is easy to assume that someone is playing games. It is easy to believe their mixed signals are intentional. But sometimes the struggle is deeper than that. Sometimes the game is not manipulation. Sometimes the game is survival. Sometimes a person is simply trying to survive their own emotions. Sometimes they do not know how to be honest without feeling exposed. Sometimes they do not know how to be close without feeling vulnerable. Sometimes they do not know how to love without awakening old wounds that convince them love always ends in disappointment or pain. Yet there is a deeper truth hidden beneath all of this. If a feeling is powerful enough to disturb someone's peace, then it is powerful enough to demand their attention. And if your presence has become impossible for them to ignore, then what exists between you is not something small. It is not something ordinary. It is something that has entered their inner world and started changing it from within. The human mind naturally seeks wholeness. It seeks understanding. It seeks truth. It seeks a way to bring together the parts of ourselves that have been separated for too long. Very often, relationships become the place where this process unfolds. A person enters our life not only as a companion, but also as a catalyst. They awaken our desires, they awaken our fears, they awaken our hopes, they awaken our wounds. They awaken the parts of ourselves we have spent years trying to avoid. They reveal what is healed and what remains unfinished. They bring hidden emotions to the surface. They do not simply touch our hearts. They touch the unfinished parts of who we are. That is why your person may struggle to explain what is happening inside them. This connection may have forced them to confront an inner conflict they can no longer ignore. One part of them wants closeness. Another part wants protection. One part wants honesty. Another part wants control. The heart moves in one direction. Fear pulls in another. The past urges caution. The soul urges truth. When those forces collide, even the strongest voice can fall silent. And in that silence, many people hope time will solve what courage has not yet faced. But time does not heal what remains hidden. Time reveals it. Time exposes it. Time brings it to the surface. If you have been waiting long enough, you may already be seeing that truth unfold. You may notice it in the repeated glance that lingers too long. You may notice it in the opportunity they let slip away. You may notice it in the message that arrives later than it should. You may notice it in an apology that comes in fragments rather than complete honesty. You may notice it in the way they speak about you indirectly. You may notice it in the space they continue to leave open for you while pretending they have moved on. You may notice it in the fact that they cannot completely release what they have never fully admitted. So what are they trying to tell you? Perhaps they are trying to tell you that the bond still exists inside them. Perhaps they are trying to tell you that the story feels unfinished. Perhaps they are trying to tell you that your impact reached deeper than they expected. Perhaps they are trying to tell you that some part of them is still listening, still remembering, still reacting, still feeling. Perhaps they are trying to tell you that their heart has not accepted the ending their mind keeps trying to write. And maybe the most painful truth is this: they may not be ready to act, but they are not untouched. They may not be ready to speak, but they are not silent within themselves. They may not be ready to return in the way you hope, but they are not free from the pull of what they feel. So what should you do with this understanding? You do not chase illusions. You do not beg for clarity from someone who remains committed to confusion. You do not shrink yourself to fit inside another person's fear. You do not mistake emotional turbulence for commitment. You do not measure your value according to someone else's readiness. Instead, you see reality clearly. You recognize that some people feel deeply but lack the strength to express those feelings. You understand that another person's inner conflict is not a reflection of your worth. Their inability to speak clearly does not erase your significance. Their silence is not the final verdict on your value. Their mixed behavior is not proof that you are difficult to love. Their confusion is not your failure. This is one of the most liberating truths in human relationships. Not everyone who loves you knows how to love you well. Not everyone who feels something understands what to do with those feelings. Not everyone who returns is ready. Not everyone who misses you has the courage to say so. Not everyone who thinks about you has the discipline to show up with honesty and integrity. And not everyone who is struggling inside can offer peace to someone else. That is why you must learn to listen beyond words. Listen to patterns. Listen to repetition. Listen to actions. Listen to what remains when explanations disappear. Listen to the emotional traces people leave behind. Pay attention to how your body responds when you think about them. Pay attention to the deeper message hidden beneath the noise. Because sometimes the soul understands something before the mind is ready to accept it. Sometimes your peace recognizes another person's instability long before your hope is willing to let go. Sometimes your intuition hears what their voice never says. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not force a confession. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is recognize the truth that is already revealing itself in small pieces. Your person may be trying to tell you this. They were changed, they were moved, they were shaken, they were challenged. They were exposed to parts of themselves they had spent years avoiding. They were awakened. And because of that, your presence now exists in a place far deeper than ordinary memory. This is no longer only about attraction. It is no longer only about affection. It is no longer only about missing someone. It is about the encounter they had with themselves through the encounter they had with you. That is why some people never leave us in the simple way we expect. They remain in the structure of our inner world. They become part of the landscape of our memory. They become a lesson, a mirror, a turning point, a wound, a source of growth. A mirror can be loved. A mirror can be feared. A mirror can be rejected. But it remains a mirror. And once someone has seen themselves clearly through another person, they can never fully return to the version of themselves that existed before. So if there is one final truth hidden inside all of this, perhaps it is this: what is real does not disappear simply because it is difficult to name. What is meaningful continues seeking expression. What is hidden keeps pushing toward the surface. What remains unresolved continues asking for attention.